Hi, it's David Knowles, the host of Ukraine the Latest. Just a quick note from me. At the time of recording, here in the London newsroom, we are aware, of course, of the news about Queen Elizabeth's health. We don't discuss it in the podcast, as you will hear, but we just wanted you to know that we'll do the very best we can, depending on whatever happens over the next days and weeks, to bring you the latest news from Ukraine. I'm David Knowles, and this is Ukraine, the latest. Today, we discuss the latest updates from the battlefront, and we have a fascinating interview with Vladislav Heraskevich, the first ever Ukrainian skeleton racer, who talks about how the war has impacted sport in Ukraine and his own life.
We are facing a very serious crisis in energy caused by Putin's war in Ukraine.
Nobody's going to break us. We're strong. We're Ukrainians.
Every weekday afternoon, we sit down with leading journalists from the Telegraph's London newsroom and our teams reporting on the ground to bring you the latest news and analysis on the war in Ukraine. It's Thursday, the 8th of September, day 197. And today, I'm joined by Associate Editor Dom Nichols and Vladislav Heraskevich. I started by asking Dom for the latest news from the Ukrainian counter-offensive.
Hi, David. Hi, everybody. It's been a confusing day, but reports seem to be backed up with we've been able to verify a number of the reports that we have received, and so there were two areas of advance from Ukraine. Firstly, in the south, in the Kherson area, pushing down from the Mykolaiv lines or northeast, running from Mykolaiv down towards Kherson. There's the four routes there, directly towards Kherson, around the coast of Kherson, a little bit further to the east down the Inilets River, and a little bit further east again. Now, recently there's been a bit of a bulge from the Inilets River push. That has been seemingly the most successful rate of advance there. However, it now looks like that has been joined by a fairly successful push further west. So the most westerly route, following the road that goes along the coast. They do seem to be making quite significant gains there. It's coming at high cost. There was a very interesting report in the Washington Post yesterday talking to soldiers in hospitals nearby who had been injured in that fight. They talk of tactical successes, but also tactical setbacks, which we can expect, and I think that gives credence to those reports, to be quite honest. But it does look like they are making gains, significant gains, I think it's fair to say, but at high cost. Now, elsewhere, the Kharkiv area, this has been the focus in the last sort of 48 hours, really, a real push there, somewhat unexpected, partly because of the media blackout, the correct imposition of a media blackout. I would suggest, as much as I'd like to know what's going on, I think the preservation of operational security there is more important, quite frankly, right now. So we haven't got very firm ideas of what's happening. However, the Institute for the Study of War, US-based think tank that are credible, well worth following, they say that Ukraine's advanced at least 20 kilometres in that area. So the area to the north of Izium, the road coming down from Russia to the east of Kharkiv, down towards Izium and into the Donbass. They're saying Ukraine's advanced about 20 kilometres into Russian-held territory there towards the town of Kupiansk. And they say that Ukraine has recaptured 400 square kilometres over the 6th and 7th of September. I mean, that is quite a significant chunk of real estate. Now, whether or not they are continuing to push on or whether they are going firm, holding their positions, resupply, we're not sure. But that is, like I say, a credible source, the ISW. Russian sources on Telegram, they're saying that the thrust was led with a force of 15 tanks and massed Ukrainian air defence, which overwhelmed the ability for Russian aviation, their principally their helicopters, battlefield helicopters, to stop that advance. But a 15 tank thrust, a punch into that area, seems to be what's caused that huge bulge there. Russian sources are also saying that Ukraine's advancing on the highways to southeast towards Izium and east towards Kupiansk, and are saying that there are Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups in the area. That I'm not sure about, but the rate of advance, the areas and direction of advance do seem to be correlating across a number of different sources, both Russian Telegram, which, as we've talked about in recent days, in some areas can be very reliable, but also backed up by other credible sources such as the ISW. There's only one other bit of news I need to bring you, and that is that today in Ramstein in Germany, the Ramstein Air Base, US Air Base in Germany, is the fifth of the Ramstein series of conferences to provide military aid for Ukraine. There's images of US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. He's opened the conference there. We've seen pictures of the British Defence Secretary Ben Wallace meeting Alexei Reznikov, Ukraine's defence minister, and we are told there are over 50 participants. That's a similar number to the last meeting, not called the Ramstein series of meetings, but the sort of British-led effort that I went to a couple of weeks ago in Copenhagen. So 50 plus participants. And Lloyd Austin, the US Secretary of Defense, has said that the already pledged, so the US are going to provide an extra $600 million in aid for Ukraine. So there will be more to say on that tomorrow, I'm sure, as we get some results through the day. But that's happening right now. That's the update.
Thank you very much, Dom. Just one question for you before we go to our guest. Having watched this Ukrainian counterattack, this counteroffensive in the south and in the north, do you have much of a sense of what the objectives are? And also, now we're sort of several days in, could you paint a picture for our listeners of, do you think it's broadly succeeding? You mentioned earlier that there were some examples of tactical setbacks. What's your sort of broad brush summation of what's happening?
Yeah, I've been racking my brains on this one. It is odd. We thought that Ukraine were not able to muster the combat power for significant advances on more than one axis. Now, these are limited gains. We have to stress that. However, the speed of advance is quite striking, but they are limited when you look at literally the big picture. Look at the map. They are more advances than they've done in many, many months, so it is notable, but we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves here. However, it has come as a surprise that these operations were able to take place. Now, does that mean that the Russian forces, or probably in the north around the Kharkiv area, the Russian separatist, so-called sort of Luhansk People's Republic forces just are not very good or not very well equipped, such that a Ukrainian thrust of, let's say, 15 tanks were able to get through? But there's probably a bit of that. But also, I just wonder if the recent activity with the long-range precision fires that have been donated, the very long-range, very precise artillery and rocket systems that have denied Russia the ability to fire back in many ways, it's also destroyed command and control posts and radar sites and all the rest of it. So I just wonder if we're seeing here a real model of precision being able to overcome mass. Quite what that means for warfare is an open question, one we should return to. But I think it's very interesting that a numerically inferior force, Ukraine, through the precise application of extreme violence, has been able to shape the battlefield such that then with a combined arms push, combined arms being infantry and armour and engineers and signallers and all the rest of it, artillery and so on and so forth, is able to make these quite significant gains. And by significant, I mean the rate of advance into not so much the real estate taken, although, as I say, 400 square kilometres is a big old chunk. So what does that mean? And are they able to keep it going? Now, if these are two coordinated but separate thrusts, i.e. if Ukraine wants to continue pushing on both of these in Kherson and Kharkiv, and they are successful, what does that mean? Because, of course, Ukraine, its intention is to take back every inch of its territory from Russia. But where's the priority? Now, you could argue the priority is the south, because the threat to Odessa needs to be removed, and also the more Ukraine can threaten Crimea, either directly or by cutting off the water, and other sort of effects there, that arguably is much more operationally significant for Russia. However, look at the north, the Donbass. Putin's changed his mind a few times, but the last time he said anything on what his objectives are, he said it was to liberate the Donbass. So he has to take. Russia does control the Luhansk Oblast, but the Donetsk Oblast further to the south is only about 55% in Russian control at the moment. So Putin still has a very long way to go to control the Donbass and, in his words, liberate it. So arguably pushing in the north might be the priority for Ukraine, because that directly stymies one of his stated objectives. So to be perfectly honest, I don't know yet. I've not yet come to a decision on which one would be more beneficial if they had to choose. Which would be more beneficial for Ukraine, to either keep pushing in the south or in the north? Obviously, you want to do both and want to do both eventually. But if they have to sequence it, I don't know which one would be offer the greatest military advantage at the moment. I mean, there's vast distances between the two, so it's not as if it'll be a very quick manoeuvre for Ukraine to move its reserves from one area to the other and back again, or see which one's doing better this week and move accordingly. So because the distances are vast, even though obviously Ukraine are working on what we call interior lines of communication, so they own the real estate that they're travelling over, and so it's quicker for them to move than necessarily is for Russia to swing her reserves around. But if it has to be sequenced, then there are very good reasons for either of those to be the priority, and I'm not just going to sort of pin the tail on the donkey and claim one should be over the other, because I think there's my judgment is still out on that, and we will continue to discuss both, I'm sure, over the next few weeks.
Well, thank you very much for that, Dom. It's our great pleasure to invite our guest onto this podcast, Vladislav Haraskevich. Vladislav, thank you very much for talking to us. We're going to get a little bit of a different perspective from you today. You are, in a minute I'll ask you to tell us all about yourself, really, but you're Ukraine's first ever skeleton racer, so the skeleton in the Winter Olympics. Can you tell us a bit about yourself? How did you get into skeleton, and what was your life in Ukraine like before the conflict?
Hello, it's nice to see you all here. So, I'm Vladislav Haraskevich, first Ukrainian skeleton athlete, two-time Olympian already. So, before full invasion, it was life. So, we have goals in the sport, so we want medals, we want to make Ukraine proud, and we want to promote our country as best way as possible. So when full invasion starts, our life changes. Our goal is also change. So today, our main goal, as all Ukrainians' goal, is one of Ukraine in this war and a peaceful sky, and of course peace and normal environment for our people. So it's today our main goal, and since already charity foundation, we work as a volunteers, try to provide help to our people, try to provide help for our soldiers. So also trying to push suspension of Russian and Belarusian athletes national sports arena, and many other things to help Ukraine in this war.
Before the invasion started at the Beijing Winter Olympics, you held up a No War in Ukraine banner to protest what turned out to be the impending Russian invasion. What was the reaction from people around you when you did that? And also the other athletes, how did they react?
Reaction was different. And at that time when we do it, many people, they don't understand why we do it. So world news doesn't really screaming about war. They was pretty it was not first news in the world, so it was everybody don't understand why I do it, but it changed in 9 days when war starts. Everybody changed their mind, and then they understand why I do it and how important it was. So another part reaction was good. Whole world supports us, and I got huge amount of messages. I think thousands, in Instagram, in everywhere. And the news, a lot of interviews, and where I talk about my country, and a lot of support from all over the world, from Asia, from Europe, from USA, from Canada, from different, from it's only with respect and treat us, but so I don't need even say what kind of country it is.
Earlier, you mentioned the charitable foundation you founded. Can you tell us about your experience giving out aid on the front lines? What was it like for you to do that in the first few months? Can you tell us about your experience?
Yeah, it was. We start do it in March. So first few weeks, I try to talk about Ukraine. So I have a lot of contacts of old media and try to about Ukraine, talk about situation what we got. And after this media boom was little bit lighter, so we try to create and work as volunteers. At the same time, my friends, my colleagues, they work as volunteers in Kyiv, but work one by one is like it's pretty hard. And we organize and work as charity foundation. So we main idea was to work more effective, and we start to work as charity foundation. It's called Hyraskevich Charity Foundation. So first, we try to provide help for our people who got in difficult situation. It was Chernigiv, it was Kyiv district, Kyiv region, and we was in Mykolaiv, and was like nearly shellings. We need to do it. We got a lot of support from our sports community, and especially from USA Luch community. And we got a lot of tactical gloves, tactical shoes, radio stations, some medical. So we give it to people who need it in the front lines. We try to work people from Kharkiv area, and we was in Kharkiv area, and also provide support, like medical support for them. It's experience. It's pretty scary. It's all our defenders are heroes, because what they see, like it's nightmares. It's really nightmares, and it's hard to imagine if you're not there. But it's really really scary. Another story what I got is when we was in Irpin, we met with people who live nearly like big house, and this house was shooted by Russian tank, and they cook at the same time when we met them. They cook some food nearly this house, so on the street, and it was like pretty cold time. It was -5 Celsius in night, and we met them, and yeah, they looks like a homeless, but when we start talking with them, like it's intelligent people. They work in the banks and like normal jobs and have normal life before invasion. And at time, like we spoke with them, and we have some lunches for them, some food for them, and we gave this food for them, and they don't even took all this food. They say, "Oh, we don't need it. Give it to people who need it more." And this what describes it. What surprised us, it also like people who got in super difficult situation, who live without electricity, who live without gas, without water. They still have this hope and belief in bright future of Ukraine, and it's really huge.
Vladislav, could you give us a sense of, just zooming out slightly, how has the invasion impacted sport as a whole in Ukraine? Could you tell us sort of what's it like on the ground? Are people still able to train? Are there matches going on? What is the situation like in your country?
So let's start from like I think good things. So yes, our elite athletes, some parts of elite athletes, they able to train, able to compete. As you see, Ukrainian flag on in the world. So in competitions, on the world championships, our athletes show great results. They now are super motivated, and they understand how important now to be in a sports arena and scream and bring more attention to Ukraine. Another story is sports facilities, sports objects, what was destroyed. So already officially nearly 140 sports objects was destroyed. And if like statistics, yeah, it's terrible, but you don't understand it. But at example, on one sport object, we was in Chernigiv on the Olympic Centrum. It's Gagarin Stadium, and at normal time, it was nearly 3,000-4,000 people who train there professionally. It's a football players, it's like weightlifting, boxing, and other sports, athletics. and now this stadium fully destroyed. So like it's only 50 meters of running rubber, which survive, and it's all. So sports really hurts, and I think we will see results of this all nightmares in 5-6 years when new generation of athletes just not come because they can't train now. They don't have these facilities. But another story. It's a lot of athletes now being on the front lines, and already more than 100 athletes being killed on the front lines. And of course, it's terrible because these athletes can't uh, can't compete, can't say hello to their international friends in the sport arenas, and of course, it's really bad for Ukrainian sports.
For those people not familiar with the sports scene in Ukraine, which, to be honest, I imagine is most people, could you just talk us through what are the sports Ukrainians care about the most? Where is their most interest for the public?
Probably, as you know, boxing. Boxing is really strong in Ukraine. So athletics, we have really good athletics. Artistic swim and normal swim. So Mikhail Romanchuk. Karate is also pretty decent results. Greco, wrestling. All wrestling is really strong in Ukraine. And we have very good tennis players in Ukraine. And now football team won some great and show good results. Volleyball team also show good results now in the world champs. Yesterday they lose for Slovenia, but show really good game and really high results. Basketball now show also on Eurobasket. They show really good results. So Ukrainian sports are really strong, and it's if you not follow it, it's just time to start to follow it because it's really strong and it's really interesting.
I want to ask you about something you said in our conversations before we did this interview, where you talked about how you believe sport is not out of politics in reference to the suspension of Russian athletes in international sports, in international sports arena. Could you talk us through that? What did you mean by that? And what do you want to see happen to Russian athletes?
In my opinion, sport is out politics. It's not true. So sport is always politics. And so we are athletes on a sports arena. We represent our country. We represent our flag. When we won some medals, we hear anthem of our country. So it's already some kind of politics. Also, IOC told about sports out of politics, but it's also not true because when we was in Pyeongchang, it was my first Olympic Games. It was in bobsleigh. They make United Korea team. So they try to unite Korea. It's also politics, so you can't. It's always was politics, and Russia use this area. Russia use sports for propaganda of war, and as we see in Luzhniki Stadium, when athletes go with Z letters and celebrates occupation of Crimea, and when they promote that their government do right thing. Of course, it's also politics, and they do propaganda of war. But sports shouldn't be about that. Sports should be propaganda of normal, healthy life, of friendship, of peace. But Russian athletes now represent war, and they represent these war crimes what Russia do on our land. And also, a lot of Russian athletes, they are part of military structures. And already we have information that few professional athletes from Russia, basketball players, they already died as a member of Russian army. So they also involved in war as a soldiers. And of course, at that time, I don't see like any chances, logistic changes, and for Russian athletes to compete in international sports arena, because it's really shame for all sports when people who support war compete and try to be like in one to be in peace and to be in united with another athletes. Of course, it's terrible. And also another example of Russian being in sports and being involved in sports is, of course, Icarus doping scandal in Sochi Olympic Games, when government was involved in doping scandal. It's first time, I think, in Olympic history when government was involved in doping scandal. And of course, it's example how important sports for Russian propaganda.
I guess my final question from me, and I'm sure Dom will have a couple for you as well, but my question is just for those Ukrainian athletes who've left Ukraine, who've gone abroad, what's the support network like? How are they being helped to continue their training, and what's it like for those of you for those sports people who've left?
Honest, I really surprised. We got so much support from our sports colleagues from another country, and just a few days ago, I have conversation with association. It's called Athletes for Ukraine, and they provide so much help for Ukrainian athletes, and our athletes can now train. It's just about one country. It's about Germany, and they have opportunity to train in the best sports facilities in the world, and they have really opportunity to be ready for competition. And they also provide some trainings for kids. They provide some opportunities to kids who refugees from Ukraine, and they have opportunity now to train to do football, other sports. Also, as I spoke with figure skaters from Ukraine, they have great facilities in Estonia. They have great facilities in Paris and Paris, and in the whole world. And whole world support us and give some help. And it's really huge, and it's also one of the reasons why our athletes now show these good results. Is because we have this support and we have opportunity to train. And also now I am staying in Germany in Königssee. It's nearly Berchtesgaden, and we also was invited to train for free in a push track, in an ice push track, and it's really appreciate, and we will be thankful forever for this support, because now it's important for Ukrainian sports, and Ukrainian sports can survive because of this support.
And just before I ask Dom if he's got anything for you, what's your next event? Where can we see you compete next? What are you training for?
I hope that we will find finance, and we will compete on a whole World Cup circle. It starts from Whistler in November, and at all it will be 8 World Cups in skeleton. So we're planning to compete all of them, and World Championships in Switzerland. So it's how our plan for season looks like. And I think next event before competition, it will be a huge event that will be held in Italy. Also, I was invited by Athletes for Ukraine to be also on this event. We will promote Ukraine, and we will promote for Ukrainian, for Germany best athletes to be also part of this community, Athletes for Ukraine, and also to promote this community to get more support for Ukrainian athletes, for Ukrainian people. So I think also you can follow my media, and I will post all upgrades and all updates on this, and I think it will be really interesting. But next competitions, it's World Cup in Whistler, Canada.
Well, thank you so much. Dom, you've been listening to all of this. Do you have any questions for our guest?
I do, yeah, thanks. Hi, Vladislav. Thanks so much for coming on. Really interesting to hear your side of it. Just going back to the Winter Olympics and your protest there, can you just talk us through what the reaction was? Did anybody come and talk to you afterwards and tell you that was inappropriate, or don't do it again, or in any way sort of tell you that there'd be consequences, or what reaction was there from the authorities there?
I see member come to us, and he asked some question about what kind of what you want to say with this action, protest. So what was your idea? And I talk that I just want a peace in my country. I want a peace in Ukraine. I don't want a war, because it's crazy. Like in 21st century, to see war in my country. And he say, okay, you got no problems, because our Olympic values, they also represent the same. So we also fight for a peace. We want a peace in whole world, and it's our that's why we do these sports, and this why Olympic values are so important for us. And they say no any disqualifications or any so everything is okay, and we'll support you.
And did you get any reaction from any Russian athletes, or do you have any friendships or any relationships with Russian athletes at all? You see them around the circuits?
It's this Russian athletes' reaction surprised me, and I wasn't friends with them, but we compete on the same tracks, on the same competition with them for 5, 6, 7 years. And when full invasion starts, I wait for some humanity, and I wait for some questions. For example, how are you, or are you okay, are you alive? But nobody write me any messages. In other hand, some bobsleigh youth athletes from Russia, they write me messages they treat me and they wishing a bomb in my house and things like that. So I was really, really surprised, and I expect some humanity, but I got some treats and bad stuff. And also, after decision of suspension Russian Belarusian athletes from bobsleigh and skeleton sports, what we got in Congress, I saw some stories in Instagram of Russian athletes where they write that they were suspended because they're super strong and because of yours, but no any word. They don't understand that the suspension is because they start war in Ukraine, and it looks like they're really brainwashed. And for me, in this, so for me it's super surprisingly, because athletes in Russia, it's people who travel around the world, and if some common Russian, they wasn't any time in other country, okay, they can believe in this propaganda of Russia. I understand it, but athletes, they're traveling all around the world, and they see and they know me as Ukrainian. They know another people from another countries, and they see how they live, and they see how they train, how they see their life. And it's that perspective, when they still promote war, for me they guilty, and they guilty 2 times more than, or 3 times more than common Russian.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Vladislav. Is there anything you haven't spoken about that you would want our listeners to understand or know? Anything that we haven't asked you that you think we should have done?
Yeah, so I can tell a little bit more work of our foundation. So what I proud, we start to do some charity trainings for kids in Ukraine, in the occupied territories. We try to provide some trainings and knowledge about sports for kids, and it's really nice to see kids when they smile, and it's really nice that we can bring some happiness through the sports, and show that sports can be can unite people, and that's nice that sports can promote something good, even in that dark times when kids going through hell, and they see rockets and they see occupiers, and now they can smile through the sports, and of course it's really nice. So support Ukrainian sports, follow Ukrainian sports, and together we will win this war. And thank you so much for your support. Thank you for all what you're doing, and thank you for sharing our stories here.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, and thank you, and good luck for your next competition. Dom Nicholls, can I just come back to you finally for your final thoughts? What should our listeners be thinking of into the days ahead?
Well, I think we should keep our eyes on the northeast of the country around Kharkiv to see if that pushback there, that counter-offensive, was taking advantage of perceived, an apparent weak Russian line, or if it was part of a much broader push up there. Link that also to, there were explosions last night in the city of Belgorod, about 60 k's inside Russia. Power distribution centre there went up in smoke, and it cut power and water supply to the Russian residents of that city. I just wonder if that is similar to the strikes we saw in Crimea as part of the shaping for the Kherson offensive. I wonder if there is a more coherent effort, operation in the Kharkiv area, whether or not that's something that we'll be seeing more of. So yeah, I'm still, jury's out in my head as to whether or not the Kharkiv push has been a sort of local counter-attack, or if they're trying to knit it together into a bigger and broader counter-offensive. So yeah, keep your eyes on both Kherson and up in the north. I think that the north at the moment is posing more questions.
Ukraine the Latest is an original podcast from The Telegraph. To stay on top of all of our Ukraine news, analysis and dispatches from the ground, subscribe to The Telegraph. You can get your first 30 days completely free at telegraph.co.uk/audio. And sign up to Dispatches, our Ukraine newsletter, which brings stories from our award-winning foreign correspondents straight to your inbox. You can listen to this conversation live at 1 p.m. each weekday on Twitter Spaces. Follow The Telegraph on Twitter so you don't miss it. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider following Ukraine the Latest on your preferred podcast app. And if you have a moment, leave a review, as it helps others find the show. You can also get in touch directly to ask questions or give comments by emailing podcasts@telegraph.co.uk. We do read every message, and we are especially interested to hear where you are listening from around the world. Ukraine the Latest is produced by Louisa Wells and Giles Gear, and today on Twitter, Claire Hubble.